Evening, folks. Call to order the regular meeting of council for Monday, March the 26th. And just before I look to approval of the agenda, acknowledging that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. Ahead of the approval of the agenda, we do have at last minute, it was late to our agenda process, but we have had a request from Mr. Alexander to do a presentation in regards to the item number 7.1 on our agenda. By 2/3 of support by council, we can allow for a 10-minute presentation that would come in where presentations are on our agenda. So with that, I would ask council if you would support that presentation by Mr. Alexander. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Alexander, then when we get to that section, which will be after our MLA, Mitzi Dean, who's here with us this evening. Thank you. With that, folks, and a change in our agenda, can I have approval of the amended agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Public participation. This is where members of the public can speak up on matters before us and or anything else you desire. Mr. Wright.
There's no mic.
Uh-oh. Aha.
I have the power. Good evening, Your Worship. I'm Chris Wright. I'm a resident on, Marianne Crescent. I almost wanted to say Macaulay Road. That's a place I lived like about 20 years ago. That isn't going to help. I have a couple questions, and I'm not really sure where the correct venue to ask them is, so I'm just going to toss them out, and people can point me in the right direction if I'm out of line here.
Sometimes we can't answer you in public participation.
Fair enough. You can always get me later. First question is regarding agenda item 7.2.2. Healthcare is obviously a very important and serious topic, but as an ordinary citizen, I'm kind of confused whether this is actually routine business or is this pre-election campaigning. I can't tell the difference. Maybe someone could speak to that when that topic's discussed. And if council were to give that idea an approval in principle, does that mean that council has given up on the idea of having a medical building built in Colwood? I think there was some public discussion about that previously. I see the two kind of going hand in hand. I like both ideas, and I don't want to be forced to pick one or the other. I also suspect that citizens have additional ideas about healthcare delivery here in the West Shore as well. Is there a risk of Colwood alienating the developer who is interested in constructing the medical building, or has that already happened? And perhaps it's time to have an open public gathering where citizens can discuss these types of ideas as forming a strategy in the West Shore for healthcare delivery. And I would ask that council have some sort of public comment opportunities prior to proceeding with this agreement in principle that's proposed with this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of public? Third and final. Nobody shifting in their seats. We shall move on. Mayor's message. Epilepsy Day today, so thank you everybody who's wearing purple. It was as close as I had. We have upcoming the Our Place Easter dinner Wednesday for members of council who are participating. Councillor Chong, you were at a work career?
Thank you. Through the mayor, I had the opportunity to present at the Royal Bay Career Day last week, and it was a great opportunity to be part of that, but it was also an eye-opener to how much work needs to be done to involve youth in government and politics. I had a group of about 20 people, 20 students, and only one had ever heard of what a city councillor is, what a city councillor does, or have even been to City Hall. But despite that, it was really uplifting to see how curious and motivated these students were to learn about politics in this session. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? And finally, Royal Bay has their second annual Easter egg hunt coming up this weekend. So there's been lots of advertisements around. I think Sunday, not time-wise, 11. But well, don't say that. It is and will be posted on our website as we do to try and help the folks in our community that are doing things. One set of minutes for adoption this evening from March the 12th. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. A number of sets of minutes for receipt. Committee of the Whole, February 27th. Committee of the Whole, March 5th. Emergency Planning minutes from November 21st, 2017. Heritage Commission from February 14th. Urban Forest Bylaw Task Force minutes from January 17th. Urban Forest Bylaw Task Force from February 1st. And also from March 1st. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And 1 to 3 for the Royal Bay Easter egg hunt. First presentation for this evening, I would like to welcome Mitzi Dean, our MLA for Esquimalt and Metchosin.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to come here and to give you an update on our work in government and to just talk a little bit about local matters as well of importance. So to start with, I'd like to just cover off a little bit of an update on Budget 2018. We took the first steps in Budget Update of 2017 to carve a new path to shared prosperity in the province. And we've taken an even bigger step in Budget 2018. And people are at the heart of our budget in every choice that we make. And for people, government is working every day to make life more affordable, improve the services that we count on, and build a strong, sustainable economy that supports jobs in every corner of the province. All of our work in government is framed by our work with Indigenous people, and I know that you all agree that addressing reconciliation is our shared responsibility. And this means a commitment to fully adopting and implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And you will see this support for Indigenous people throughout our budget. Now, a large investment in our provincial budget is our ambitious plan for universal childcare. As we know in our community, for far too many parents, childcare is nearly as expensive as housing and even harder to find. And our local businesses tell us that when parents can't find childcare, they lose a worker. They have told us that economic growth is being hampered by their labour supply being restricted. So we are working on a plan to deliver the kind of care that our kids deserve, where parents need it, and at a price they can afford. Now, another priority that I know that we share, locally and regionally as well, is the housing crisis. So we have set out a 30-point plan that commits to long-term solutions. Our comprehensive housing plan is working to curb speculation, crack down on tax fraud, support renters, and build the homes that people need. We're implementing tools and measures such as new taxes that will stabilise the market and stop speculators treating our homes as commodities and our province as a place to park their capital. We're also going to help build the homes that people need. So these will be homes that are a mix of housing for families, for people with disabilities, and for seniors. They'll range from supported social housing to market rental housing for people with moderate incomes. And we'll also make significant investments to preserve and protect our existing social housing for the people already living in them. We can't fix this crisis overnight, but we can act now and plan for the future. And we know that housing affordability can hit renters the hardest, and many of our most vulnerable citizens are at risk. So as a first step, we're going to make improvements to our 2 rental support programs, our rental assistance program, known as RAP, and the shelter aid for elderly renters, known as SAFER. And we've allocated additional resources to the residential tenancy branch to help it operate more effectively and help move through dispute resolution in a more timely fashion. And looking locally as well, dollars have been allocated for investments in our community infrastructure. For example, the Royal Jubilee Hospital with an MRI replacement project, work on the Mackenzie Interchange, adding the bus lanes, expanding Royal Bay Secondary School, adding 600 spaces to the existing 800, Now, at the legislature, we're on just a short break for the spring session, and we're also into estimates debate, where we go through the ministry budgets. And along with representing our community in statements and in debates, I also serve on the Finance Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, and on Treasury Board. I'm also really honoured to be appointed as the Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity. And that brings me into contact with many provincial stakeholders and ministers across government. And I'll be working with a range of colleagues to ensure that we roll out policies and programmes to address discrimination that is systemic, as well as harm and violence that is preventable. Over the last few months, you all know as well that I was also working on transportation issues in our region, and I was meeting with local stakeholders, and we've been working on next key steps and also decision points as well. And as I think you all know, for me, engagement is a priority, and so I've also been meeting with and hearing from a wide range of individuals and organisations in my constituency office. So in closing, I just want to say thank you to you all for all of your leadership, for your commitment, and your willingness to work together to develop positive solutions for our community. I've really appreciated the opportunity of meeting with your mayor on several occasions, and I look forward to working together to build stronger relationships in the months ahead. Thank you again for the invitation to appear before you tonight.
Thank you. Any questions to our MLA? Councillor Knoll.
A quick question on the medical services premium. The government is not going to be collecting that anymore, but they are instituting a payroll tax. Now, that payroll tax is going to affect Colwood directly and cost us an awful lot more than we ever paid in medical service premiums. To me, you're taxing my taxpayers for that. I don't think that's fair. And I don't think the payroll taxes on cities should be instituted. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment. And you're right, MSP premiums have been halved this year, and then they will actually be eliminated. The employer's healthcare tax will be rolled out from next year, and it's in development. And so I appreciate you sharing that concern with me. It is something we've heard from other municipalities as well, and also from school districts. And so this is something that is in development.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I actually have three more statements. I'm going to steal it, or just because you're here, I want to just so that you hear them, and so hopefully you can take it back to your government as well. The first is just around marijuana, and we had a presentation from the RCMP around training and about how to around impaired and how to distinguish it and so on. And it ends up being that the municipalities are going to end up taking the responsibility for training our RCMP officers to be able to do that, but we're not sharing in any of the revenue from that. So I'm just hoping that that's on the radar at some point, that will get addressed. And I'll let you speak to that in a second. The second thing that I just wanted to push was being chair of the Greater Victoria Public Library. I'm always passionate about that, and two things that I'm hoping for that we'll see in the future is one, that the libraries are actually a line item within the budget and it gets taken out. And the second is that we have seen a 0% increase for libraries over the last 10 years, and we were actually hoping to see something on this last year, and we haven't, and I'm hoping that that's something that's important that you could also bring back. The final thing is regarding the government support of the Royal Bay High School. And I think it's great that we're expanding that. One of my concerns that I asked staff recently was, what are we going to do for parking? And I said, is there any option of us ever building parking under the school so that we're not just taking up more land for that? And it was basically, the message I was getting back was, well, that's a non-starter, that there just isn't the funding or ability to do that. And I think that rolls into a lot of other issues around affordability and keeping our land base being used for housing versus being used just for a parking lot. And so I would love to actually see some funding or some creative ideas of how do we take all those parking spots that are going to have to be created with 600 new student spots, and where do all the teachers do park. So I'm just hoping that those are on your radar and you at some point address them.
Thank you very much. So just quickly, yes, the marijuana issue about revenue sharing and the burdens on municipalities is something that has come to our attention. So that is something that is on the radar. The libraries, we heard there was very good representation at the Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services that I sit on, around the line item and also needing to have an increase. So we did get some recommendations into our report, and I'm sure that that's something that we'll revisit again when we get into that process this year. And yes, I'm really familiar with the need for parking in West Shore. So that is something that will be on my radar, and I look forward to having more discussions and coming up with partners and stakeholders around creative solutions. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Day?
Thank you. And I hate to ask you this question because I know it's a difficult problem, but I think it's one that you and I both know is really important for the West Shore, and that is to have adequate housing for youth. And we've worked long and hard, both of us, on trying to facilitate strategies to keep families from having to live far-flung from one another, and provide services for youth in their own communities so that they don't have to leave for services. And just hoping that you will keep on your radar the need for youth housing in the West Shore, brought to our attention by the plight of homeless youth, bringing that message clearly to our doorstep and saying, kids who are good kids, who want to go to school, who show up early, but simply don't have a safe place to live, need help. So I'm hoping that that is high on your radar and that there might be some good news.
Thank you. And I have already spoken to the Ministry about that issue and about the unique situation for youth in West Shore. And so I'm hoping that at some point there will be another opportunity where different partners can come together, and we'll be able to facilitate that discussion and make sure that the Ministry is properly informed to be able to make decisions. Yeah. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Nothing else from anybody? With that, again, thanks, Mitzi, for coming in.
Thank you.
Next presentation, Mr. Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is John Alexander. My address is 26 Bastion Square in Victoria. And I am the solicitor for the Olympic View Development Corporation, Gulf BC, the owners of the Olympic View lands that I'm sure you are all very familiar with, ongoing development in this community that's been there for a long, long time. I want to speak to item 7.1.1, which is a staff report that was dated, I think, March the 12th. My clients became aware of that report yesterday for the first time. I apologize for not having been able to get on the agenda in the normal way by asking to be a delegation, but for some reason staff did not inform my client about this report and the fact it was coming forward, and so as soon as we saw it on the agenda, we made efforts to move forward. The staff report proposes a collaborative process for doing a replanning exercise on the Olympic View lands, but you'll note that it starts off by doing all of this unilaterally, and it's not very collaborative at all. You'll also note that in the report there is nothing at all from the owner of the land in terms of their knowledge of this process, any indication of their willingness to collaborate or cooperate, and nothing about their position, and no indication even that they'd been given notice of the report. So in my submission, it does not bode well for a collaborative process to try to start it off in this fashion. There are a number of points that would have been made in a more detailed fashion and in writing and with the staff had that opportunity been provided. It's a much more efficient and effective way to deliver information to the council, and council would have had a much more usable report had that process happened. You also, I think, have received 2 letters in the last day from 2 professional planners raising concerns and asking questions about how this process went in this direction and what perhaps this process means as an indicator to people who want to come to Colwood and do things like the MLA was talking about, build housing, advance things forward, make spaces for daycares, perhaps build more schools. It's not a positive message when the landowners see that under the guise of collaboration, staff comes forward with an idea to re-plan a project that has long since been planned and approved. Some of these things that are in the report do need to be addressed, and I'll just hit the high points. The report in section 1 in the summary refers to a draft bylaw. So it's an attempt to start implementing a bylaw that has not even yet been passed. And so it's a bit presumptuous to assume that the draft OCP will be a bylaw. And right now, the 2008 bylaw is the law, and landowners in this municipality are entitled to proceed on the basis of the law. Under background, there's an indication from staff that the developer does not intend to proceed with developing a 9-hole golf course. This is not an assumption that the staff's entitled to make, and there's no indication ever been made formally that the plan approved by the 2011 development permit has been abandoned. It has not been abandoned. There's a reference to changes because of the significant development on Latoria Road. Well, Latoria Road project was on the drawing boards and done 2004, 5, 6. The development permit for this property was issued in 2011 after everyone knew exactly what was at Latoria Road, so that's incorrect information. The document on the top of page 2 says the area plan is no longer consistent with the 2008 OCP. That is completely incorrect. The area plan is a part of the 2008 OCP. It is Bylaw 999, and you can find it by looking at your official copy of that bylaw. So the discussion and analysis talks about collaboration with Olympic View and then managing the development process through development permit process. There doesn't seem to be any indication that there will be any actual collaboration if we go this direction. And the development permit process, of course, only kicks in once the bylaw is adopted with all of its guidelines. And so what follows is not managing it with the landowner. What follows is the landowner having to comply with those guidelines. The biggest concern halfway down through the heading Phase 1 is the statement that says a zoning amendment will be completed in concert with the development of the area plan. A landowner who sees a municipality say a zoning amendment will be completed without that owner applying sees one thing: downzoning. A landowner who sees downzoning does not see collaboration. A landowner who sees downzoning sees, I have to protect my legal position. So that's what this report telegraphs to me. Olympic View, you're going to face a downzoning. Now, it's true that the municipality has been working with the landowner over the last 20 months to try to get Phase 1 of a subdivision approved. That is right now looking at like about a 20% reduction in single-family lot density. That's the kind of downzoning that entirely takes away a landowner's profit and makes a landowner say, I cannot invest another penny in public infrastructure, because if my density is taken away and I put in the roads and the sewers and the waters and the lagoons and all the other things that are public amenities, public infrastructure, and I lose 20% of my lots, I make no money. I go broke. Financial considerations, you're talking about $100,000. Olympic View has professional planners working collaboratively with your planning staff. They're already paying these planning consultants to collaborate, to cooperate. The $100,000 to hire your own outside planner is somewhat unusual in my experience. If this is the direction that council is going, you shouldn't plan for $100,000 in planning being the only expense. Because as I say, this landowner is going to have no choice but to enforce its current rights under its current zoning and its current 2011 development permit. And we're going to spend a lot of money on planning and unfortunately probably spend a lot of money on legal fees, which means you're going to have to add a lot more than $100,000 to this budget project. What we ask you to do is to reset the clock on this, to table this report, and to instruct staff to go back and start a collaborative process and come back to council with a report that says, yes, there is a collaborative process that the landowner wishes to be involved in and embraces and will move forward with, or no, it's going to be done the hard way. But you don't have the information you need to do that now, because apart from this 9 minutes that I've taken of your time, you haven't had any input from the landowner yet. So let's not start a fight. Send it back to staff, ask them to sit down, talk to the landowner, its current consultants, and actually come forward with a collaborative proposal. Thank you very much. Any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr. Alexander? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving then into correspondence requiring council direction, we did receive an answer back from Minister Carol James of Finance in regards to our letter on the cannabis. And it is before you to say, wrong letter. I guess for me, I realize it's still a work in progress, but the federal and provincial governments intend to keep cannabis taxes low to support the objective of reducing illicit market activity. As such, it is expected that cannabis taxation revenues will not generate significant provincial revenues. The province recognizes that the legalization of cannabis will lead to additional costs for local governments. We will be able to have more informed discussions once full details of regulatory and taxation regimes are known and governments have more certainty in terms of future costs and revenues. That being said, I'm not sure where UBCM stands on this because I think it's a fairly blanket response that's gone out to many of the municipalities in the province who've engaged in on this, so there is likely to be further conversation coming up. But I do think that, when we can anticipate increase of costs, that maybe we keep this on our radar in some form. Councillor Date?
Thank you. I agree that we're going to need to keep this on our radar. I think that many communities like ourselves are concerned with the costs that municipalities will have to bear for the implementation of the uniform laws for the province. So I would simply say that we should stay on top of the issues as they come forward through UBCM and AVICC, and I would move that we receive the letter.
Seconder?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 6.2, email from Charlotte Gorley in regards to plastic bag ban, which we have a hiatus of at this point, pending what we hear back.
Madam Mayor, given that we are waiting for a legal decision that may take a considerable time, I would move we receive the letter. And I do that because the amount of research that's already been done by Victoria and the CRD in plastic bags is quite sizable. The CRD website has an awful lot of information on that, and I would not like to see Colwood waste an awful lot of energy doing stuff that's already been done. Should the plastic bag bylaw ever come back to us, at that point we could review the available data. I don't think we have to gather our own.
That's been seconded. Any other comments? Councillor Day?
Thank you. The request in the letter is for us to take advantage of some of the data that's easily gathered within our own community, and I would say that there is already quite a lot of data that's been gathered over a number of years through the shoreline cleanup at Esquimalt Lagoon, where we do have documented exactly how many cigarette butts we pick up. And really and truly, I think the point is well made that the garbage that we see when we walk throughout our community and that we find on the beach when we go to clean up along the beach is not plastic bags. But that's not to say how much we're finding in the landfill or in places that we don't see that hasn't already blown out into the ocean and sunk. But I do think that even if we don't institute a completely separate data gathering event, such as was contemplated in the email associated with our cleanup, a spring cleanup, that at least we look at the data when we do bring this back to us. I would suggest that we look at the data that we get from our Esquimalt Lagoon cleanup, because that is very typical of what we would find, I think, in any of our parks, and is already very well documented as to what we're actually finding on the ground.
Good. Anything further? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving us into Planning and Land Use, 7.1.1, Director of Planning.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I have to apologize. I didn't have time to get a tie on this afternoon, so I was going to pop home, but didn't get a chance, so apologies. So I've got a little bit more lengthy introduction than I normally have for items like this, but I thought it was necessary given the recent correspondence we've received. Staff are requesting that Council provide direction on starting an update to the Olympic View Area Plan contained within Section 27 of the Official Community Plan, as well as the corresponding CD2 Olympic View Comprehensive Development Zone contained within the Land Use Bylaw. As stated in the staff report in tonight's Council meeting agenda, the draft OCP, currently at first reading stage, calls for an update to the Olympic View Area Plan as a priority action. This policy was based on significant feedback from the community concerning the desire to more carefully develop greenfield and hillside areas. An example of this can be found in the results of the Making Waves OCP Review online survey conducted at the end of 2016 and beginning of 2017. They showed 98% of respondents stating a preference for hillside development that fits into the natural environment or maintenance of the natural environment in its original state. This contrasted by the only 2% of respondents that supported hillside development using retaining walls. At the end of last year, the city once again consulted the public on these issues through a survey. This time through a randomized telephone survey. It found a high level of agreement with various draft Official Community Plan policy directions, including an average 8.6 out of 10 agreement with a policy direction to shape new development to fit the natural environment rather than altering natural features. These and other factors, such as the successful creation of a mixed-use neighborhood center at Latoria Walk, since the adoption of the Olympic View Area Plan, first created in 1997, with updates in 2002, have led staff to propose the initiation of an area planning review. The landowner has stated a desire to develop the site contrary to the current OCP area plan in several ways. These include the deletion of a planned 9-hole golf course and replacement with City Park. That has been conveyed to staff in multiple meetings. Also proposes realignment of the road network and land use designations. In response, the city has highlighted the need to undertake an OCP amendment process to proceed past Phase 1 of Olympic View. To date, the city has not received an application to amend the Olympic View Area Plan from the developer. Earlier this year, representatives of the landowner did state that they were willing to participate in a review of the area plan. However, they also stated that they were not willing to amend the corresponding CD2 zone. The Olympic View zone goes hand in hand with the corresponding OCP area plan and must be included in the scope of the review. This is to ensure that it meaningfully addresses potential amendments based on the community's desire to improve the environmental and aesthetic performance of hillside development. This and other mixed messaging regarding potential legal action has led staff to propose a city-led area planning process. It is, as stated in the draft terms of reference attached to the staff report, designed to focus on the results of meaningful public consultation as well as collaboration with the landowner. Taking such a city-led approach is normal in area planning exercises that involve multiple individually owned properties. However, it is not common for single master plan sites. That being said, it is completely within the rights of this council to determine the lawful content of specific area plans within its own official community plan and zoning bylaw, master planned or not. In the absence of a fully willing landowner, it may be the only option to move forward. I should note that staff have been advised late this afternoon through correspondence by Mr. Michael Von Hausen that his planning firm will be engaged to undertake an area plan review of the site. I should also note that staff have significant respect for Mr. Von Hausen's impressive body of work and his effectiveness in liaising with the city on Phase 1 of the Olympic View development. I'd go on to note that staff have no objections if the landowner decided to proceed by giving responsibility to a planner of Mr. Von Hausen's capabilities to manage an OCP amendment application. This support would be conditional provided that objectives for conducting meaningful public engagement are met, and there is acknowledgement that the amendments to the CD2 zone would also be required to fully modernize the Olympic View Master Plan. It is also seen by staff to be essential for the developer to better define and consolidate their points of communication with their team and the city if we were to move forward with a conventional official community plan amendment application. Without these issues being resolved, staff stand by a recommendation in the staff report for a city-led process at this time. This concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Council?
I'll go first. I've got several questions, I guess, through the chair to staff. So the very first one, I guess, I have is we're looking at moving forward an area plan based on an anticipated OCP versus the previous OCP. And I guess my question to you is, how do I, as a councillor, approve an expenditure on something that hasn't been approved by this council? So, for example, what I'm saying is we're building an area plan based on an OCP which has not been yet approved. And so, my understanding is I should not be voting on anything until after public comment is complete. And then we then begin to that process of approving an OCP and then building it out. So I guess my question to you is, how do I approve an expenditure on something along that lines before it's actually been approved?
I maybe should have clarified in the introduction, and potentially it could have been clear in the report, that we would be advocating moving forward with a review of the area plan regardless of the state of the official community plan. So they're separate in terms of the need to do the work. The fact is the Olympic View area plan is out of date, and that wouldn't change whether we were in a larger official community plan review or not.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you. So as a follow-up, so I'm becoming even more confused then. Because what I heard from Mr. Alexander tonight was that there is a 2011, whatever it was, whatever, a bylaw approval or whatever we approved. I don't know what we approved in 2011. And that was based on the 2008 or 2002 OCP, which is the OCP that is currently in place. So why would we be wanting to do an area review that's already been passed?
Through your worship, excellent question. The development permit 1111 was an environmental development permit that was issued by staff. The director of planning of the day was delegated the power to issue that development permit. It was issued under the auspices of the current 2008 official community plan. However, it is the position of the city that development permit lapsed. It was not, construction was not substantially completed per the terms of the development permit. And therefore, we've received a second application for phase one. It's very different from an area planning exercise is what we're advocating tonight.
More follow-up.
Thank you. So the second issue that I guess I'm concerned about is around taxpayer money being spent to begin an area service review when it sounds, even by your comments, that that's very uncommon, that's normally the cost of the developer and not the community. So I guess I'm very hesitant around why are we spending our money to do this versus the normal processes.
Your worship, the proposals for the city to undertake this work is not the first choice of staff. The fact is we have to manage the process. It takes internal resources to do that. It is simply the state of affairs with respect to the developer that we feel this is a necessity at this time. Statements made tonight by representatives of the developer, and as I said in my introduction by Mr. Von Hausen, give me pause to consider a way forward with the developer. But as I outlined in my introduction and the staff report, we're receiving mixed signals and a reticence to meaningfully modernize the plan with respect to the zoning.
Done. Anybody else? Councillor Day?
Thank you. I've gone through the report quite carefully, but you did mention, I didn't quite catch the very last sentence that you said in your preamble. Can you say it again?
I mentioned that basically without the issues that I identified being fully resolved, that we stand by our staff recommendation in the staff report. Yeah.
Okay. And I do have great difficulty contributing taxpayer money for the process to develop an area plan for Olympic View. I do understand that we are updating our official community plan, and that the community has spoken quite clearly that they wish to go in a little bit different direction than the city has been moving in the past. I think everyone would agree I've been on council for quite a long time, but the year that I was first elected is the same year that the last amendment was made for this development. So it's been plenty of time. That's five councils have come and gone while we've been waiting for the best thing that we could envision of the day to materialize. Now, I do really hope that we can move forward with a plan that the community is engaged in and that fits within the official community plan vision that the community has so far identified. And in fact, that fits within the 2008 official community plan, which had a lot of great vision, but not always such good ways to achieve it. But, you know, the vision that existed 20 years ago for Olympic View's development hasn't happened in 20 years. And we do need to either leave it alone or move ahead. So if my understanding after this long time on council is that it's up to the developer to present a plan that is consistent with the official community plan in order to get the necessary approvals to move forward. It's not, I think, up to the taxpayers of Colwood to pay for all the necessary resources to develop that plan. It's up to the developer to present a vision that matches with the vision of the community. So I do have a really difficult time. I know that there are lots of site-specific considerations in Olympic View, but I believe that is the responsibility of the developer to bring forward a plan that the community can accept, that meets with the plan that we've made, and the plan does clearly say that we are not going to flatten everything and treat it like as if it was a pancake to develop. It's a mountain or a hill or a river, and we have to treat it carefully. So I'm not sure what the best option is going forward. I certainly have a hard time contributing taxpayer funds, given that so much of what we do at the city is to support development. I mean, we have a whole department geared towards supporting development. If you had any advice for us, how we certainly want to work with our development community, but they have to want to work with us.
I have to echo Councillor Day, and in addition, I do not believe the taxpayers of the City of Colwood should be burdened with the unnecessary cost for the preparation of an area plan and new zone for Olympic View lands. I wouldn't be supporting that. And I did not support the retaining wall regulation bylaw. Once again, in my opinion, I feel that development within Colwood is being stifled with too many restrictions as a result of previous development. I do not believe that the developers should have to pay the price for mistakes of others, and I believe that the developers of the Olympic View lands should be able to develop their lands as previously approved by council.
Councillor Knoll.
First, a quick question to staff. Your report says very clearly that the 9-hole golf course and the luxury hotel resort are not being proposed anymore. I think I heard the proponent say something different tonight. So can I get that clarified? Are those in the plan or are they not in the plan?
Staff have noted on several occasions an indication from the developer that they are not willing to proceed with a 9-hole golf course as part of the plan. However, it's council's prerogative to ask questions of the developer if they so choose.
I would like to ask the proponent, since he's here, and I would like to know, are you going to build those and when? Because as I was on council in 2002, and that was a very key part of the whole development, as I recall. So if that's not in there anymore, to me that completely changes the original plan.
So development permit 1111 has a complete layout, all the lots, all the locations, and it's a greenway subdivision, and it shows green spaces between the main roads that is set out right in the DP 1111 as a golf course. Those areas are going to remain as greenways. Whether they actually have tees and holes on them will depend on the degree to which the rest of this development can go together in accordance with that plan. The city planners have asked the owner to amend what has been approved in DP 1111 in ways that make it more difficult to achieve the actual golf holes, but it it continues to be a greenway subdivision with about half of the total area in Greenway Park environmental set-asides. So it's going to look like a golf course whether it has the holes on it or not, but the amendments that they've been asked to consider, and which Mr. Van Housen is working on with staff cooperatively, pushes some of the roads and lot lines around in a way that actually using it as a golf course might be tough. And so I would submit that you're probably getting something even better than a golf course, which is the golf course open space without the restrictions that one has to have if you've got a bunch of people running up and down smacking the balls around.
Thank you. How about the hotel?
I don't know what the details of all the multifamily sites are. The CD2 zoning permits hotel, but as I think council knows and staff would tell them, to require certain uses is not something a zoning bylaw can do, and the covenants that went along with this did not impose that as a use that was required. So everything that is planned is in accordance with the existing covenants that were granted and the development permit, which does bind local government. The Local Government Act is very clear. It says a development permit is binding on the local government. And staff says DP 1111 is no longer enforced because construction was not substantially completed. That, unfortunately, is a complete misstatement of the law. What Section 504 of the Local Government Act says, permit lapses if the relevant construction is not substantially started. And it says that the land use permit does, if the holder of the land use permit does not substantially start any construction. And there was a significant amount of construction done on the environmental issues, weirs, retaining walls, training of some of the creeks, starting all of those works. They've clearly been substantially started and hundreds of thousands of dollars spent. So we can have a fight at court about whether DP 1111 is still in place. The landowner is prepared to flex what's in DP 1111 to take into account what the public wants to see now, to make sure there's not retaining walls, to not blast the rocks flat, to not build on a pancake. That's not what they're looking to do. And to the extent that staff says, can we revisit some aspects of DP 1111 to make it better? The developer's 100% on side. But if the developer's told, we're throwing out your zoning, you don't have a development permit, council's not bound by it, then the fight is on. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Thank you, and I'll remind council that council some time ago devolved development permit granting to staff from council. So that could lead us into an interesting legal argument on whether DP 1111 is in effect or not. I really think I agree with Councillor Day on this. If we go and spend $100,000 in Colwood taxpayer money on a plan that is not supported by the landowner, it's a total waste of money. So the idea of the landowner and the city collaboratively and cooperatively coming up with an area plan really appeals to me. And I think he's right. We can't legally hold them to everything that we're trying to put into the new OCP because it is not enforced. We can legally hold them to everything that's in the 2008 OCP. And there's an awful lot in there that I think we have not adequately enforced over the years. I was also on council when that OCP was written, so it's quite a history with this project. But my feeling is the idea of tabling this whole report and instructing staff to attempt to work collaboratively with the landowner is a good one. In the long run, it'll be the cheaper way to go for Colwood. It will get things moving a lot faster than going the whole plan all by ourselves. And I would definitely support that as long as we see good faith collaboration and not just developers saying, I've got everything I want right here and that's all I'm going to do. So it has to be collaborative and it has to be open to the public. Thank you.
I heard the same mentions of words from our staff as from our proponent here as well. So if there's more comment or a resolution coming forward, I'm going to wait for that.
Thank you. I don't have anything additional to add, just that I agree with everything that's being said. And from all the correspondence that we've gotten since the agenda is being released, I see that both sides are still willing to collaborate and work together. And I think there's still room to do that before we consider a consultant. And I don't believe that taxpayers should have to pay for that either. So thank you.
So I need that resolution, folks.
I would like to move that the staff report be tabled and that staff be instructed to work collaboratively with the property owner to come up with an acceptable area plan to both the city and the landowner.
Seconder?
Second.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. I just want to make sure that that includes a full public process as well, because I want the public to be involved, and that was the one concern. Even though it's mentioned, the staff report is laid out very well in terms of what their vision is. The only thing that seems to be missing is that we need to get both partners working on the same table, and I'm hopeful that can happen, whether that's through Mr. Van Housen or someone else, where I think we can certainly see that the community spoke very loud and very decisively about the direction that they would like to see Colwood go when they were giving their public participation towards the creation of our new OCP. And I think it's really important for all of us to work together to make that a reality.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is 7.2, 7.2.1. We have from Director of Corporate Services, Women on Wheels application, Passenger Transportation Board.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an application that's been received by Women on Wheels to have the Passenger Transportation Board approve 2 new taxi licenses and 2 wheelchair accessible taxi licenses. The only opportunity that council has to comment is through the municipal notice, and council can either support the application or they can provide comment against the application, whichever council deems appropriate. If council does have negative comments about an application, that is shared with the applicant, but there is no other communication with council. It's fully a Passenger Transportation Board decision. Staff is recommending that council does support the application from Women on Wheels. I know the application included in the package in the municipal notice doesn't give us very much information about the service itself, but my understanding through the Goldstream Gazette is that this is a taxi service that will be operated solely by women. Supposedly there's a lot of demand for female cab drivers, and a lot of women can't get them, so this is what they're hoping to be able to provide. They're going to provide services, they hope, in the whole Greater Victoria area, including Souk and the Wanda-Fuqua electoral area, and we're just looking for support from council, including a provision which we usually put in our resolutions, which is to ask that wheelchair accessible service be provided in all areas that they serve and that they use green vehicles.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. I think this is marvelous news, and I happened to catch on Check the little article that they did about Women on Wheels, and I did happen to notice that her cab was a Prius, so a relatively green vehicle, and their license does also clearly identify 2 regular taxis and 2 accessible taxis. And I was just going to share with you why I think that is so important. We had a meeting here with the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, and our Souk representative took a taxi from the Langford Bus Exchange to arrive at the meeting here, because the buses aren't that convenient in the evening hours. And she assumed that she would be able to get an accessible taxi home after the meeting only to find out that there is no accessible taxi located in the West Shore. So if she called from Souk, she can get an accessible taxi. If she called from Colwood, she could not. And in fact, she had to leave her wheelchair here and catch a ride home with someone else and then come back and get her wheelchair the next day by other means. So it is critically important and a definite need within our community for accessible taxis. So I would like to move resolution number 2.
Seconder?
Sorry, that we that council send a letter of support for Women on Wheels taxi, and that they include a request to encourage the owner to provide services to people with disabilities on all routes and to use green vehicles.
Second.
Any discussion, Councillor Martin? And then Nolt?
Thank you. So, just so that I'm clear, we're talking about a taxi service that will limit the ability for men to use it? Like, so is it about women drivers, or is it about, like, I understand women drivers, but so it's not a women on woman service, correct? So it's just about women driving, but we're giving accessibility to everybody. Okay, then I'm good with it. Thank you.
I was going to make generally the same comment. According to our Constitution, it is illegal to discriminate on the basis of sex. That is exactly what this company is proposing to do. While I recognize the need for more handicapped taxi cabs, I will not be supporting the motion on exactly that reason.
So can I please get a clarification then? Because I'm getting mixed messages even from council here, because I was under the same assumption as Councillor Nault, but now I'm being told by others that is not correct. So which is it?
I believe the news story said that they would be driven only by women.
So you're just talking about the drivers?
Yes.
Okay.
Not used only by women, but driven only by women, and discrimination for jobs on the basis of sex is against the Constitution. I would expect somebody with big pocketbooks would take these guys to court. You know, I recognize the need for women drivers, but to do this on the basis of only women drivers, no, I won't support it.
And let's not forget it's the PT board that deals with that.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that, yes, it is women drivers, women owners of the taxis who are drivers. I'm not sure how that fits with the Constitution. I thoroughly understand the concern. I would not want, as an employee, to be discriminated against whether what gender you are. However, they're advertising that they offer that service. They offer that service to anyone. Anyone can use the service. So from the point of view of the traveling public, it doesn't make a difference. It does make somewhat of a difference in terms of employment.
Councillor Trong?
Thank you, through the mayor. Yeah, I hope this isn't discriminating on one, but you know, I'm seeing this as a greatly positive application. It's empowering women, and it's also offering that opportunity. I've been taking taxis for years, and actually I took one this weekend, and I have never in my life had a woman taxi driver. This weekend I had a man, and I'm not saying I have a problem with that, but I think this is a positive application paired with the accessibility taxi. I think it's a great thing, and if it just so happens to be all women drivers, so what? You know, we have a lot of male taxi drivers. So I will be supporting Resolution 2.
We have a mover and a seconder. So with that, all those in favor? Opposed? Duly noted. Thank you, Councillor. Item 7.2.2, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. So I have a couple corrections that I'd just like to put in my notes as well. First of all, I misspoke, or I miswrote, I guess is a better way to say it, that Marianne Alto is the hospital chair of the CRD, not Island Health Chair, so I apologize for that. Really quick synopsis of what was going on. This is a passion of resident Dave Saunders, our previous mayor, who was wanting to look at getting some additional palliative care within the community. And this was just a matter of us sort of jump-starting it. We had an initial meeting. Excuse me. And I also need to make a point of this. Our MLA, Mitzi contacted me earlier today just to confirm that she was not able to sit within a working group moving forward. And she didn't explain to me why, but she's not able to. So the idea was, obviously we have a dramatic need for palliative care within the West Shore. Right now, obviously the priority is full or over to capacity, and we're just looking at an opportunity of finding some funding moving forward. This was just sort of to jumpstart the idea and to get it moving. Where we're at this present time is that we're just collecting support from the community in general to make sure that we do want additional palliative care here in the community. And so the ask today is that council write a letter with the mayor's signature just stating basically that they are in support of seeking out additional funding for long-term palliative care for our elderly. And then from that point on, we're trying to be as encompassing as possible. So this isn't meant to be an exclusive group at all. This is just to get it started. And we're trying to get as many people within the public and within council involved who's ever passionate about this. And that's really all I have to say about it this evening. There was a couple questions by Mr. Wright at the beginning, which I will address, or I try to address. The first was basically, is this sort of an election campaign? And it certainly is not, but obviously it's a passion of who's ever on council and whoever wants to continue to move this forward. So would this continue on after the next election? That would really be up to the people who sit in these chairs. But I think, obviously, from a Dave standpoint, Dave is super passionate about this, and I don't see him letting this go. So I think that this would definitely continue to move forward in the future. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or move the recommendation.
Any questions? Councillor Dave?
Thank you. So I remember this coming up as an item when we were first discussing Colwood Corners and what could possibly go there. So it is something that council has certainly been pushing for a number of years, along with other services, to make sure that we have the full basket of services within the West Shore, because it is not particularly convenient or helpful to your day if you have to travel to Royal Jubilee Hospital where you find no parking, where you're stuck in traffic for 2 hours coming home. Of course, it's made even harder if you happen to be unwell when you have to do that. Those trips are very hard on families, and they're hard on people who are suffering with long-term illnesses. So I think it's really important. I know that we've been pushing for both seniors facilities and for palliative care in the West Shore for a long time now. And last that I understood, we were on the list with the hospital board for something in the next couple of years to come forward. Everything is very, very slow when it comes to Island Health because I guess the numbers are just that big for them, and change is hard, and you have to be on their facilities plan for a long time before you get anything. So I certainly think that we could write a letter to VHA and remind them how important it is to us, and I would certainly be willing to help in any way with that.
Thank you. Anybody else? That's all.
No, I would agree wholeheartedly that there is need for more of this care in Colwood. There's need for general medical care in Colwood as well. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I see them as both of them we need, and I'm happy to provide a letter of support. I've just had an aunt pass away at the Priory, so there is one room at least.
Oh, that's terrible.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'll go back to when Mr. Saunders was mayor, and yes, he did get this underway. It kind of came about back when the Oak Bay Lodge was closing down, and he took it up as an interest and followed that up when I took over as mayor. And I did continue those meetings with Island Health and with Mr. Carr and entourage from there to get it on their radar, which it did get into the 10-year plan. That's how they work with Island Health, VHA. And just as recently as this January, we've had a reminder from Tim Orr, Director of Residential Services, that hospice beds are on the way. Then a plan is coming to add those to South Island region, including West Shore, over the next 2 years. So I am heartened that they still have us on the radar, and a letter of continued interest is warranted to ensure that they actually land them here. So somebody needs to make that. Councillor Day.
So just a question before I make the motion. Would you think that the letter would be most appropriately addressed to the fellow who corresponded, to Mr. Orr?
It could go to Mr. Orr, of Director of Residential Services, Island Health.
Okay, so I would move that we read a letter to Mr. Orr, Director of Island Services for VHA.
Seconder? Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Finally, we are into our last item for this evening, bylaw number 1724 for final reading. This is the Urban Forest Bylaw number 1710 2017 amendment. And I do understand, before we get into this, Councillor Nault, you have some further information, or maybe it's coming from here.
This
one way or
is exactly as was presented at the first 3 readings. It's to remove hazardous trees from being under this bylaw. The Urban Forest Committee has, I hope, their final meeting on Thursday of last week. And their recommendations for an entirely new bylaw will be coming to council shortly. This will be addressed in a different way in that bylaw, but in the interim, we really need to be able to remove those trees. So the amendment as proposed should go through as is.
Are we clear on that? Because I just want to, I'm trying to jump from screen to screen here. All I'm doing is losing my place.
Your Worship, staff are under the understanding that the committee is going to report back to council for April 9th. If the committee is going to come forward with an alternate to what is being proposed in this bylaw amendment, we're going to create potentially further confusion with the public about what we're actually asking the public to do. So if that's the case, if we are expecting to see something from the committee by April 9th that's going to be contrary to what we have in front of us tonight, staff's recommendation is that we hold this until we know further, until what the committee is going to be reporting on.
This time I'll have to disagree with staff. The committee will be presenting recommendations to council. Council doesn't have to follow those recommendations, at which point, if they amend them, the bylaw still has to be forwarded to legal to be rewritten. Has to come back to council for all 4 readings. That could be months and months in the process. In the interim, the current bylaw has such onerous requirements on cutting down a hazardous tree that the committee felt that should be addressed immediately. I still feel the same way. The new bylaw will completely rewrite the old bylaw, so there would be an awful lot more changes than just the hazardous tree definitions. So I would move final.
Final's been moved. Seconder? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. That's it, folks. Oh, yeah, you see, Gordy's not here. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.